There's another one up here.
I'll hold on to you.
We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. We only have a couple of items on the agenda, but we're going to open up with a moment of silence and also with the pledge. Mr. Gilmore is going to lead us in the pledge after the moment of silence.
Attention, salute, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item on the agenda is authorization to apply for a school number for the VLA. We discussed this at length at our last board work session, but then we failed to put it on the agenda for an actual vote, and it's important and crucial that we have this in the minutes so that we can send to the state to get our number. So at this time, I'm looking for a motion to authorize Dr. Cox and Ms. Ralph-Dowski to apply for a school number for the VLA.
So moved.
Mr. Iverson makes the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Spivey makes the second. Roll call, or any discussion? Roll call, Ms. King.
Mr. Gilmore,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Dr. Rouse,
Yes.
Mr. Spivey.
Yes.
And I will, for the record, report that Mr. Hughes is out of the county on business, and he is with us remotely as part of the school board policy and part of the state law that allows a board member to attend remotely if they are out of the county. And I have verified by FaceTime that it is Mr. Hughes on the other end of the telephone call. This time we are ready for consideration of the draft of the 21-22 budget. We have a meeting tomorrow afternoon with the budget committee with the Sullivan County commissioners. So it's important for us to go through the budget tonight so that we can present it to the budget committee tomorrow night. And I would assume Mr. Loach is going to do the presentation here. At this point, you have a copy in front of you, and we will stay as long as we need to discuss this, but we will need to vote on it as a draft so that if we need to make changes, we can do that later. Mr. Loach.
All right, I handed you 3 handouts, and the first big one is the general purpose school fund budget. And that's a very lengthy itemized detail of our general purpose school fund, the draft version. I'll just go over the quick highlights of that and tell you where we're at, and then we'll go over that second sheet about the GP reserves. For local revenues, in the GPS fund budget, we have local revenues that were projected by county finance. It reflects a reduction in property tax of $2,025,000, and that was offset by an increase in local option sales tax of $2,025,000. That's approximately 11 to 12 cents in the property tax rate, but it was offset by increase in the local option sales tax because local option sales tax has been coming in a little bit better than in the past. We did receive the BEP estimate for April. We received that May the 4th.
It was minutes before the board meeting Thursday.
Yeah, so it did utilize the hold harmless option for the April estimate. Luckily, we were able to use that for hold harmless, or we would have a reduction in BEP, and that reflects $1,002,000 above last year's BEP estimate. That also reflects a 4% increase for professional salaries.
Is that would probably be the majority or over that, wouldn't it, the 4%?
Majority of,
I mean, the $1 million that it went up, is that almost all taken up in that 4%?
yes,
Okay.
the increase in BEP was reflected, 4% was the majority of that increase,
Okay.
correct?
Thank you.
I believe it was $754,000 for instructional salary, if that's right.
let me clarify something here we've talked about the salary equalization study that we've done all year. Everything you have in the budget reflects the salary equalization schedule for all of our teaching staff, plus the 4% state raise. Is that correct?
Yes,
So as
for all employees.
For 4% for all employees, but the salary equalization schedule for all teaching staff, and which would affect anybody with in a position requiring a teaching certificate. That would be the key to it.
You're stealing my thunder. That's my next slide.
I'm sorry.
Any other questions on revenues before I go any further?
I think you said this, Ingrid, I just want to make sure I'm clear. And we brought it up before, but how many pennies on the tax rate are they taking out on their revenue projection? Did you say 11 or 12 cents from the general purpose school fund from property taxes?
Yes, sir.
And they're making that up based on projections of local option sales taxes that fluctuate, correct?
Correct.
I mean, I'm just interested, does anybody, I mean, I can't think of a time in the 6 years I've been on the school board where they've taken that much out of the general purpose school fund from property taxes, which are stable and you can project a collection rate. I mean, can anybody else? Has that happened since you've been here before?
No, sir.
Doesn't seem like a
Not-
very,
Not in my career either.
okay,
And as an example of the instability, and correct me if I'm wrong on this analogy, but basing our revenue on local option sales tax is a whole lot like basing your salary on commission sales, because, we're banking on sales tax staying up throughout the year. And if they don't, then we will not be able to fund the whole budget. Am I correct on that?
That's right.
And these numbers were given to us by the finance director.
Correct.
And even though it's a reduction in property tax, he's increased the projection in the local option sales tax. But it's the property tax is much more stable than the local option sales tax. And if we budget this amount and then the local option sales tax drops during the year, then we're going to be scrambling to try to find a way to fund that. Am I correct on that?
It'll be on us at the end, and that would have to come from our reserves. That's not basic.
It would be all on us and not on them, because
That's
once they
correct.
pass the budget, their hands are washed off the revenue side, right?
That's right.
Okay.
And to just follow up with Mr. Spivey and Chairman Jones, have they given any rationale as to why they've changed it and increased it like that?
And I've not been to a budget committee meeting yet, and they have not voted on the tax rate yet. All we have received is projected revenues from the Director of Finance, Larry Bailey. All we got was a projection. We didn't get any explanation as to that. So I don't know what the rationale would be behind it. But again, the property tax rate has not been set yet. That's set by the full commission.
I just don't understand. We all know that education is the most important avenue that any of us have. It's the way out of poverty. It's the way to help people move from where they are to somewhere else. I don't understand how our governing body of Sullivan County, how they do not understand the worth of education. Many of those people are very educated. I do not understand a governing body not caring anymore about education, and the caring is very evident if they choose to do this. It's very evident. I'm not asking for a comment. I'm commenting.
Dr. Cox, I have a
Yes.
comment.
Go ahead. I'll turn the microphone on, Mr. Hughes.
I'd like to follow up on Mr. Spivey's comments and make a statement, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but the assumptions that they make or the projections they make in future sales tax revenue is partially based on the boom in construction that we're having at this point in time, which may or may not continue. Is that accurate?
I think it would be totally on the economy as it is. It may not be just construction, it could be everything. And we all know that we've received stimulus packages, multiple stimulus packages, and most people spend those when they get them. So I don't know if they spend them all in Sullivan County, but I can tell you there's probably been an increase because of that.
I have a follow-up when she's done. I can't.
Go ahead.
Okay, Ingrid, I know that we're under a different system now, but talk to us about the WFTE ADA, the full-time weighted equivalent average daily attendance. We had been showing a 2% loss over time, and I think the law changed. What does it look like if we'd been making a projection? What does it look like our loss would have been, and how is that going to be accounted for?
So these current numbers that we have now don't reflect any kind of loss in the city-county split. The projections that we were given from Mr. Bailey are based on last year's numbers. They're not even this current year's numbers. It just assumes that we didn't lose anything this year. As you know, we lost 0.5 percentage point in the city-county split, which was tremendous considering the loss that we had. If the cities had not lost, we would have been in some serious shape. That 0.5 percentage point for this year's funds cost us about $500,000 for 0.5 percentage point. Again, there is nothing reflected in this as far as a loss in city-county split. Our revenues are projected at the same amount they were for the 2021 budget.
And to follow up on Mr. Hughes' question, so in the first year of this new financial management system that our county went and passed a private act for, they're basing the revenue and the property taxes. They're planning on taking 11 to 12 cents out of the general purpose school fund, if I understand right.
That's what it looks like according to this projection.
Bottom line, they're taking out $2,025,000, right?
That's correct.
And then depending on the reassessment as to what the value of the penny is right now, it's $371,000, is that right?
That's right.
So,
And that's our portion.
Right.
$2,025,000 is just our portion. When they cut that penny out of the property tax, that also cuts the city's portion of
Right.
that penny.
Yeah, it cuts all education.
So we're at
funding.
44% right now, so you can see that that would be a little over double that amount that they would reduce the property tax by.
And you may not know the answer to this, Ms. Deloach, but has there been any indication from the finance director what the county plans to do with that over $2 million that they're taking from property taxes that are stable in the school fund?
I have had no communication with him, other than he sent me the 2 accounts with the projected revenues, and that's all I've had.
I certainly hope that the citizens of Sullivan County will ask the budget committee and our new finance director under this new system they lobbied for what they plan to do with that $2 million they're taking from the school system. And I know that simplifies it, but it really doesn't, because that's the most stable funding source for any county funds. It's just that the local option sales tax, by law, they can't take those from the school systems. And that's Sullivan County, that's Kingsport, and that's Bristol.
Property tax is about the only revenue they have control over, because local option sales tax is state mandated.
under the new private act, we have no ability to change our revenue projections. Am I correct on that?
That's correct.
It's all up to the finance director for the county. So there's nothing that we can do to change the projected revenues. It puts the monkey on our back, though, as to how we deal with the expenditures when it comes down to it. We get revenue from the state. We have no control over that. We have to take what they send us. We have no control over the revenues that we get from the county. We can disagree with them, and I think there was some places in the financial act to where we can actually disagree and so forth, but at this point, being in the first year, we don't really have a way of doing that. So we are stuck with the numbers that we have been handed as far as the reduction. The answer that you'll get from them is that we have not reduced the total amount of funding that we are giving to the county. We have simply changed the way that we are giving it to you, but it puts what I think puts us on thin ice when it comes to putting money into the local option sales tax by increasing it $2 million. And keep in mind that they are taken from Kingsport and Bristol. Also, I've been in contact with some officials from those schools, and they are concerned too about the projection. Now, the county does not project any revenue for the city schools. They just get their share of the property tax. Is that correct, Ingrid?
That's right.
So the projections that they get are made by, in-house by them. But keep in mind that the city schools are losing about 55% of this option also. We're losing 44 something, they're losing combined about 55%. So that's critical to understand that, but it's also important that we know that our hands are tied on some things, and we have got to deal with what we've got as we look at the total numbers.
Can you explain a little bit more on the hold harmless? That's not changing the percentage, that's just holding the actual BEP? I mean, what does that actually mean?
They calculated our estimate for April, just like any other year. And they compared it to the estimate that we had in, or not the estimate, the allocation that we had in January of 2021. So we get a new estimate or a new allocation in January to reflect the new health insurance rates. So they made sure that we didn't lose any money from April to January, or from January to April. So from last year to this year, they want to make sure we didn't lose any money. Well, when they calculated it up with all the normal calculations, we were at a loss. So the hold harmless brought you back up to that January level, and then they added the 4% on top of it.
Okay. So, I guess, will they correct that at some point in the future? Will that be something they readjust later on, or is that something that, is that set the bar at a different level now and it'll always be off that?
It's my understanding that legislation could potentially be approved to make hold harmless for this coming year only.
Okay.
And then if they want to do it again, they'd have to have legislation approved to do it again.
But if they don't do it again, then we'll take kind of a double step back?
I think so. Hold harmless is very good for us this year, but down the road,
Yeah.
it could be a huge dip that you take instead of just taking little dips at a time.
That's kind of what I was wanting to make sure, because it seemed like there's a potential of a really big hit later.
Yeah.
Okay. So they brought us up, I'm sorry, so they brought us up $1 million to make us level. At some point, they could take that away.
Yeah, we could lose more than $1 million because that $1 million was basically for the 4%, majority of it was. Then we would lose back down before the 4%, because we would have been lower than that if we hadn't had hold harmless. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's scary, but it makes sense.
Yeah, it's
That's
something to
why I was
think
like-
about. I mean, hold harmless is good for right now,
Yeah.
but think 2 years down the road where we might be if hold harmless isn't there. Now, who knows what's gonna happen between now and next year, but
Yeah.
if we should still be the same enrollment, we could easily lose if hold harmless is not approved for another year.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's the thin ice you hear cracking
Yeah.
underneath.
Yeah, if we were to lose local option sales tax this year, this coming year, and then next year hold harmless wasn't approved, we would be a double whammy to try to catch up to. And that's one reason why I think we need a substantial fund balance, because if that should happen, you're gonna have a couple of months' notice at the most to figure out what you're gonna do. And I don't know many options that you have, is what you're gonna do. Fund balance is really nice to be able to say, okay, we can handle this and buy us a little time till we get somewhere else.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this statement that I'm gonna make. If we have a projection for local option sales tax and we exceed that, we are able to keep that money as additional revenue at the end of the year. But if we have a projection of local option sales tax and we don't meet it, then we have to go back to the fund balance.
Yeah, because you use that as a revenue to
Right. And by them changing our projections on local option sales tax, they've taken away even the hope of getting more sales tax at the end of the year for us. I mean, right now, we're getting a little more than we projected from last year, I believe, and that's helpful. But I've been through years of where we have actually dropped in local option sales tax in critical times. Back in 2008, I think, was a year that we went down quite a bit. So it's crucial for us to understand it of how it's budgeted. It's also crucial for us to get that message out to our county commissioners, because they're the ones who will ultimately vote on the actual property tax rate. And at this point, I don't think that they can change. I don't think they will change their projections for us. They might, but I think they have projected a certain amount. It would be nice if they would go back and project that increase in the property tax and lower the projection for local option sales tax to where we would have a little bit of a safety net should we see a drop this year.
That's a good point, Mr. Jones. I would say, would it be accurate to say that they're putting the education funding in our education systems at risk versus the whole county funding? So they've put that on the school systems now by changing it to Mr. Jones' point. I mean, is that a fair statement? I mean, I think, Dr. Rouse, I think that goes to your point of, it shows how they feel about education. And maybe they don't understand this, and that's why it's important to talk about it. But if you're putting public education for our whole county that affects both cities as well at risk of how many hot dogs somebody buys at Pal's or how much gas they get, I mean, that shows you how the county commission feels about public education. And I'm going to keep saying it every meeting. I agree with you. I mean, as far as property taxes or any taxes go, public education should be the first in line. And I think it's ridiculous, honestly. I mean, in the first year of this new system that our county commission has voted at 11:30 at night months ago to spend $1 million of CARES Act money to renovate an old building for their new finance office, they're planning on taking pennies out of the general purpose school fund and putting our kids' education and one of the largest employers in the county at risk. And it's ridiculous.
Another statement that I'm going to make that may be more philosophical than anything, but every student in the city schools and the county schools are county residents. Their parents pay property tax just like we who live in the county but not the city. Some people say we should not be funding city schools. We're not funding city schools. We are funding Sullivan County students, and some of those students just happen to live in the cities. Do the cities provide additional monies on top of that? We know the answer is yes, and they pay for it because the city residents pay double tax. And I lived in the city, Matthew lives in the city now, he pays double tax. And you can't complain about it, but we need to understand it's Sullivan County students, Bristol, Kingsport, and Sullivan County all together. And we are funding the students, and we should be pushing to fund it for the students, not whether they live in the city or not. And the cities are going to suffer. The kids are going to suffer in the city just like our kids are going to suffer. But that's a philosophical statement and maybe even a political statement, but at the same time, everyone needs to understand how the funding follows the kids.
Sorry for all those interruptions.
No, that's what it's all about. All right, the next thing we have is expenditures. As Mr. Jones talked earlier, there is a provision in there for the salary equity plan. The professional salaries have gone to the regional average salary scale. That costs us about $4.2 million between salary and benefits on that. After we did the salary equity schedule, then we applied the 4% to all of our employees. So support staff and professional employees alike, there's 4% included in there. That was about $2.3 million for that. There's a 2.5% insurance increase at January the 1st. Our insurance year is January the 1st to December 31st, so they're projecting a 2.5%. They'll probably find out closer numbers towards the month of June, but right now they're saying use 2.5% as a projection. So that was about $125,000. We've also budgeted nurses at full-time. They were a 6-hour employee, not full-time, and now they will be full-time, and be there the whole school day. That was about $200,000. A one-time expenditure in the budget is the retirement incentive. That was about $531,000. In order to offset these increases, we had reduction in staff. They equated to about $2.9 million.
But the $531,000 is not a recurring expense, that's a one-time only that we're dealing with. And you said 2.9 on reduction, on savings and reduction in staff?
Correct.
Was that mainly accomplished through attrition and then consolidation?
The
Yes.
incentive too.
Okay, that's all. Okay.
With the incentive, is that different
The
from that?
incentive was a part of it, consolidation was a part of it.
We have reduced positions, not people. We have not
Right.
laid anyone off. We have positions that were unfilled, that when people took early retirement, that we did not have to fill, we were able to get by without that. So we have not had any type of reduction in force that was arbitrary, and I think that's important to make sure we understand that. We had some people that were hired as interims last year after school started, and even a few before, that knew that this was just a one-year appointment. So when you hear people say, I didn't get hired back, it's because they were in a position that was an interim temporary position to begin with. And you will hear a few of those that will say, I did not get hired back, but that's the reason for that.
I didn't realize you couldn't see the red, sorry. It was in red. You can see it really good on my screen, but up there you can't really see it at all. That's where we're at, to get to the bottom line, and the bottom line is really what I want to talk to you about. When I get to balance the budget, I'm over $8 million out of balance. So we're gonna go to that second sheet that I gave you that says GP reserve balances. As you know, we've all been talking, it's just a one-page sheet, and you should have it, it should look like this on the screen.
That's this here?
We've been talking about taking all kinds of projects out of fund balance, because we have a significant fund balance, and that's what we had it there for. And we've taken turf, we've taken lighting, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, all kinds of things, and we'll go down that list. But, we gotta keep a tally on that, and we gotta be able to balance the budget at the end of the year. So, what I've listed at the top is what we have available at the start of this year, what we have available for the reserves. We had the BEP reserve, that was almost $800,000. We had the future capital needs reserve, that was at $1.8 million. And then we had an undesignated fund balance of $15 million. What I've tried to estimate is what we anticipate to roll into fund balance at the end of this fiscal year. We budgeted over $4 million, but I want to know where are we going to really be at the end of the year. So the best of my projections, we're going to be around $1 million that will roll into fund balance. So that's, we won't touch anything coming out of fund balance, but we'll roll into it $1 million. So you total all that up, and what we have available is a little over $18 million, almost $19 million that we have available to use. Now we got to look at what we've already said we're going to use our fund balance for to get through this year. Turf project, we've got architect fees for that. We've got the actual turf project itself. Lighting for athletic and site lighting at the middle school and the high school. Furniture, fixtures, and equipment for Westridge. The Henry Hard driveway design, we approved that. total all that up, that's what we know so far, we have a contract for, and we know for sure that's where we're at on those. That's a little over $5.9 million. Now, where do we wanna be? We know we wanna do it, but we just don't have a contract for it. That's the next set of things that we have. We know we wanna do this, but we haven't finalized the cost. There's some technology items for West Ridge High School, the county commission approved that. We think there'll be about $125,000 worth of stuff there for that. Additional furniture, fixtures, and equipment, $482,000. That's just to get us, I don't have a specific list for that, but that's to get us from where our estimate was. So that number, we may not spend exactly that, but that's what our estimate is. We've been given an estimate for the driveway for Henry Har Road, $3 million. If I budget, balance the budget with what I have, that's 8.6. I gotta keep 3% of my operating expenditures by state law in order to be able to budget out of fund balance. I have to have 3%. I don't have that if I do all these things. I need 2.6 million and I have 647,000. I'm slightly short.
Let me ask, I'm trying to get my head wrapped around one thing, and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it correctly. So, this last year, we used in the neighborhood of $4 million to balance the budget. So,
We budgeted.
we budgeted, well, yeah, we budgeted the use of $4 million from the fund balance to.
It's just a budget.
Okay, just bad words, but that's basically, we set aside $4 million. So at that point, it was no longer undesignated fund balance, because we designated it into our budget.
Correct.
So, is that, I mean, we came back and another $1 million, right?
Correct.
Okay, so does that first number reflect the $4 million that we took out as
Tell me
being?
which first number we're talking about.
The $4 million that we took out to put into our budget, because at that point it stopped being undesignated fund balance and became designated fund balance. So is that $4 million back to the 15, or does that come later, or where is that?
It's technically not a reserved fund balance.
Okay,
You just can't budget from it because it's already been budgeted, if that makes sense. You can't
Okay.
spend it, but it's not in a reserve account.
okay,
So
so,
you're just doing that on a budgetary basis. We're just saying, worst case scenario, we're gonna have to take out over $4 million to balance our budget.
right, so, but it's no longer considered undesignated at that point, because it's, I guess I'm just trying
Technically, it's
to,
still considered undesignated fund balance.
okay,
But you gotta keep in your mind, I can't
It's a
do that
budget.
because I know I'm gonna have to balance the budget at the end of the year.
okay. So is that $4 million part of the 15?
Yes,
Okay, that's what I was trying to figure out, was that somehow come back, or is it actually part of it? Okay,
it's part of it. So when we go into this year, whatever number we have, we'll reserve that in our minds that that's in there to balance the budget. Now, do we think we're gonna have to take $8 million out of the budget out of the reserve at the end of the year? No, I don't think so. But worst case scenario, yeah, we could.
so,
Now, do I think we're gonna roll in? Probably not. If we do all this, I don't see any way that we could roll into it. We'll probably have to dip into fund balance at the end of the year.
so when you're putting this together again, and we say that we need 8.6 out of our undesignated fund balance to balance our budget, will our undesignated fund balance still show 15, or will it reflect that 8.6 reduction?
Run it by me one more time.
So it's right now saying undesignated is 15 million. If we say we need to use 8.6 for our budget, to balance our budget, however you want to say the words of that, will our undesignated fund balance still be 15, or will it be 15 minus the 8.6?
It'll still be 15,
Okay,
but
so
you
it's,
can't spend the other 8 million.
right, okay, so
gonna
it's
be
just,
kinda in a holding pattern. I
Okay.
guess if,
it's
to
still
put it in the
part of
relation
it.
of your personal checking account, they put a hold on that money, you just can't do it
Okay.
yet.
Would it be fair to say it's kind of like having it encumbered?
Yeah. Because you have budgeted for it, you just haven't
Right.
necessarily spent that whole dollar amount.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to get that clear in my head, because I'm asked that undesignated fund balance often. People use that number, they love that number. But whenever you sit back and say, well, yeah, but we've got 4 million set aside that we can't use, then that number's 11. And then next year, I guess that number will be 7. So I'm just trying to get it, okay, thank you, I really appreciate that.
So
It helped me out.
in that 15 million, you also have these projects that we said we're gonna do.
Right.
Now, they're technically not reserved yet, but we've got approval to use that. So once we get the contract, that's when it becomes reserved and we can no longer use it in undesignated fund balance. Same thing with the budget. We've marked it for that, but we've not done it yet. So when we get to the end of the year, whatever we have to take out, that's when it becomes taken out of fund balance. It's no longer undesignated.
So you said when it's reserved, once it becomes reserved, it takes it out of the undesignated?
Once we sign a contract for those
Okay,
projects,
gotcha.
that becomes designated. It comes out of undesignated fund balance.
Okay.
Now, at the end of the year, when we balance the budget, the actual revenues versus expenditures, whether that's adding or taking away, that's when it affects fund balance at the end of the year.
Gotcha, thank you.
That's a good point, Mr. Iverson, because therein,
Yeah.
I think, lies the major political problem that I feel like has been misrepresented by certain people that want to point to that fund balance. But when you're doing your accounting work, like you said, if you say, worst case, we're gonna have to use 4 million last year or 8 million this year to balance it, it would be ridiculous to say that we can go spend that money, because who are we gonna look to if worst case does happen? And it goes back to the same point I'd make about changing our general purpose school fund. I mean, they're putting us more at risk in that based on the local option sales tax. I'll be quiet for now.
I'll make another point about the good fund balance that we have. I agree with Ingrid that it's critical that we have a good fund balance, but that money is invested and the county reaps the benefits of the interest that's earned on that money. Is that correct, Ingrid, as far as interest?
Yes.
And when you look at $18 million at 1%, that's $180,000 a year. And over the last 8 years, we have probably brought in $1 million of interest. The school system doesn't get the interest, and correct me if I'm wrong on that, but the county gets the interest on that. So to argue that we shouldn't have a good fund balance kind of is saying you're taking away money from the county by doing that. The bigger fund balance we have, it should be to their advantage to get the interest on it. So the longer we can hold on to it, the more interest that they're going to get. Now that's different in the city. I think the city gets their own. They get their own interest. The county got the interest on part of the bond issue before we spent the money. The cities earned interest and they got to keep the money. I'm talking to city schools because it was, at least I think they did. I know Bristol.
I know the city gets, I don't know if it goes straight to the schools, but yeah.
I think it went to the city, so we should not argue that we need to keep a low fund balance. We should be saying we need to keep a good fund balance. And I can remember a time when we had a very small fund balance 9 years ago when I came on board. It was very minimal. I don't know if Evelyn remembers how much it was or not, but it was minimal. So the goal should be to try to keep the fund balance up at the end of the year and not adopt the spend it or lose it mentality that I can remember when that existed. At the end of the year, if you had the money left over, you had to try to spend it because it went back to in my case, it went back to the city at that point. But our people have been frugal this year and we're going to come up with maybe $1 million extra of not spending. That's going to be great if we do that. And we should compliment them for being that way for the last several years that we've built it up. And the $3 million that we have in there for the Henry Hard driveway, we don't know what that's going to cost. That's the driveway, somewhere between 2 and 3 million, but we projected high on that so that we would make sure that we had enough money budgeted when the bids come in. And that's out of next year's budget, not this year's, so we don't have to ask to transfer it. So by budgeting the process, it will be part of the budget, right?
And I'll just add to that, Chairman Jones, I would think that the commission here again should be very proud of how frugal we are and that we've been able to grow a fund balance. And I'm repeating myself here, but as a principal, I remember receiving checks. That's back when you got the paper checks. Ms. Rafalowski, you can correct me here if I'm wrong. I can remember John Odell standing right there and saying, do not go back to your schools and give these checks to your teachers. The money is not in the bank. We don't have it. That happened more than one time. Am I not correct?
You're absolutely correct.
So to have a fund balance that we can do these wonderful projects when the fund balance begins to grow, and we can do these projects for our children of Sullivan County, I would think they'd take their hat off to us and say, job well done.
Does this mean we have to find $2 million in expenditures to balance the budget?
I would highly recommend it, because I can't fund everything with what we've got.
Because we are,
Either $2 million in revenue or $2 million in expenditures, and
and we're no longer in control of revenue, so we can't really up that, right?
we don't have anything we can sell to generate revenue. We can't increase our sales, we don't sell anything.
And we have to send a balanced budget to the budget committee, am I correct? And in the past, I think I'm correct in this, that we could change the revenue projections if we were able to justify that to balance the budget.
You can always request additional funding, and you can still do that. You can still request additional funding. That has to change with the new law.
One would think that, a boom in local option sales tax in an area where taxes are rarely raised would be to the benefit of the school system as opposed to the detriment. I know I've said it before, but I look forward to hearing what they plan on doing with that money, and I hope that people will pay attention to this in our county and hold them accountable. I intend to.
This is maybe not a fair question. I don't mean to blindside you, but, as I'm looking at this, we know we don't have a renovation budget either. Do you know in the last year or so how much has come out of reserve to take care of necessary projects like roofs and heating systems and those kind of things? Because obviously if we don't have a reserve, we can't take care of that since we no longer have the renovation money.
When I stood up here to present to you, it suddenly dawned on me I didn't include the renovation budget, and we need to present that to the board as well as the budget committee, because we do have a renovation budget that needs to be presented. I didn't print it and give it to you, but it's here. We have not had to tap into reserves because the renovation fund had enough to cover for this year's expenses to date. Now, tomorrow could be a completely different story. We have one roof blow off and that's the end of it. But we have been able to manage within our own renovation fund without funding now. But that being said, we are done. There won't be a next year renovation fund unless we get additional funding.
Now, we had about $1 million at the start of the school year in
We did.
renovation, right?
And barring any other catastrophes, we've been able to manage with what we have. However, we won't have any funds for next year.
Thank you.
have a question for the chairman.
Hang on just one second. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Hughes.
Even under the new system, the school board has to vote to approve the budget, does it not?
Yes. We have to present a balanced budget to them, and I believe the deadline, if I read it correctly, is May 15th is when they have to have it through the budget committee, which is this Friday. Can we present a budget that's out of balance, $2 million, and ask for additional $2 million of funding?
I think you can.
And that would be,
It's a draft budget, keep in mind too.
that would be 5 cents on the property tax rate as it currently exists. Each penny is worth $371,000. So to increase it, $2 million would be a 5-cent property tax. Right?
Increase it $2 million to be a 5-cent property tax?
Am I right about that?
Well, that's gonna be 5 total pennies, but you're gonna need 5 cents of our
Right.
allocation. You're
Yeah.
gonna need our allocation, not a
We
total
only
penny,
get-
so you're
we-
only gonna get about
So
$185,000.
it would take the 10 cents
Yeah.
at least,
Yeah.
more than 10 cents. So it would,
Go back to 11 cents,
it'd go back,
exactly what they cut us.
it'd go back to what they cut us,
That's right.
because they cut us $2,025,000. So if we're out of balance $2 million, then to get that back, they need to bring the property tax back up to what they have projected in cutting,
That's right.
and leave the sales tax. So my recommendation would be that that's the way we approve the budget tonight as a draft, is to ask them to approve our total budget of $81 million, or whatever the number was,
89.
89.
I didn't do my best to print out.
But with the increase back in property tax, instead of cutting us $2,025,000, that they take it back and add the $2,025,000 back in and leave the projected sales tax where it is.
And that's a good point you highlight that I want to keep stressing. When they're taking 10 or 11 pennies out of the general purpose school fund, it might be $2 million to us, but on the split, we're only 44%. So it's more than it's more like over $4 million of public funding for education that comes from property taxes for every child in Sullivan County, regardless of their school system.
It's amazing. It would take 12.04 cents to bring it back up to where it needs to be. That number keeps popping up.
I'm gonna ask a question just because I know it's gonna be asked of me and it's gonna be asked of whoever carries this over there, just because it's the obvious question that everybody's asking about. We all know that we lost enrollment, but we're asking for an increase of $4.3 million in our budget. So that's gonna be the question that we're asked. And I mean, I'd like to I haven't had a chance to look through all of it, but I mean, we're talking about $2.9 million of, lost in wages. I mean, so I'm just trying to figure out, and I mean, I'd like to be able to answer that question rationally. How can we sit back and say we lost 500 kids, but our budget went up 4.3 million? So, I mean, I think it's something that we need to talk about as a group, and we all need to
Yeah.
understand it, because we're gonna be asked that question.
Where'd you get 500 kids?
Dr. Cox?
And that's what we lost in the average daily attendance. That's not the number of children that we lost.
Okay, well, okay, so I asked that, but I mean, so if we lost 588, that still comes to the same question that we're gonna be asked. And I
Okay.
mean, I just want us to be able to answer that question.
Here's the way that I would attempt to answer it. We started out the school year with the goal of trying to do a regional salary equalization pay scale. And we offered the early retirement incentive to do that. The cost of the salary equalization plan was, I believe, projected to be 3.3 million, if I remember correctly, slightly over 3.3. And by putting people on the regional salary, and then on top of that is the 4% that came from the state. So if you look at that, it brings you right back up to the $4 million that you're looking at, that we're asking for. You know, we're asking to keep the money that had been going to salaries, because we've lost, I think we had 33 take early retirement, and we've lost some others because we haven't filled those positions. The state put the 4% in. Now, 4% in is above and beyond BEP. We're putting in 4% for every non-certificated staff member, secretaries, aides, and everything else. We're putting in 4% for non-funded teaching positions. We're adding nurses full-time, and I think the pandemic probably told us that we needed nurses full-time. So it's pretty obvious there. The only place that you can look at in the budget right now and say you can cut $2 million is the Henry Har driveway. You can say, take your $2 million out of that, and that's the first thing somebody will say is you've got $2 million right there.
Well, that's different though. I mean, that's not in our budget. That's in the.
But if it is,
No, it is.
it is.
Yeah. Okay, so it's.
If you didn't have that money there,
No, I'm saying, but it's not.
yeah, if you didn't,
It's
if you
part of the
didn't,
89 million?
yeah.
It's not part of the 89 million, but
Okay,
it's
yeah.
part of your
Yeah, it's part of.
gap to get
yeah,
there.
it's the
And
other-
we've
so
already-
It would bring the gap, we're looking at $2 million to bring us back
Right.
up, and if you took that out, that would bring you back up, right? We could use that $2 million to fund the shortfall,
Right.
and that's the first thing somebody's gonna say, is don't build the driveway in.
And I'm trying not arguing. I'm just trying to make sure.
Well, I didn't mean you were gonna say that.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying it's like, you know, we saw the slide a minute ago. We said it's 3.3 million is what it cost us to bring everybody up in the 4%, which is fantastic. But we had a thing up there that said 2.9 million is what we saved
So,
in reduction.
so we were 400,000 short
Right.
of what our projection was.
Perfect. But-
And, you know, hopefully, now, the reason you're 400,000 short, my projection on salaries did not include benefits, I believe, and if I remember correctly.
Okay.
It would take us $5.4 million to bring us up to Bristol City Schools' salary schedule, using the current staff that we have. So we settled on the 3.3 million to bring us up to the regional average. Now, like I said, we did not go ahead and add benefits to that. But that, I think that accounts for the 400,000 that you saw there difference.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying that if we said it's 3.3 to get us there, but we saved almost 3.
Yeah.
So we had 400,000 that we're having to make up. That still doesn't explain the 4.3 million, if it was only a $400,000 difference in the salary. I'm asking because I want us to all be able to,
But,
and I need to understand it, because I can't sell it if I don't understand it. And I'm trying to
But,
find it.
but if you save the 2.9 million,
Right.
which is what it shows.
Yes.
That means you're gonna respend it.
Right.
So we turn back around
Part of
and
the
put it back in the budget.
Yes.
And, then you got the, 4% from the state.
Right.
I'm not sure,
Which was a
I had a
million.
number here somewhere
I think
that,
she said close to 800,000, I believe.
that,
I
and,
believe.
and then on top of that, and on top of that, you're paying $531,000 for the early retirement bonus itself,
Okay.
which is in the budget. So you add a lot of those numbers up and you'll come up close to the $4 million. We've not added any new staff that I know of. We've got some positions unfilled right now,
Yeah.
but we haven't added anybody that's new. And most of our budget, I don't know the number, what, 82% is in personnel or
It's right at 80, yes.
80%? So, if you look at the budget and you start making cuts, what are you gonna cut?
Like I say.
I'm not asking you, I'm just, that's
I'm
a-
just trying to figure out, I mean, where our 4.3 came from when we're saying we need that money, and I get it, that we were $400,000 short. And I guess I just need to look at this a little bit more to figure out where it's all at, but I'm just trying to figure out where our 4 million was whenever we don't.
well, we
Because,
took,
you know, in a time of down, I mean, we've been in a down slide for a long time. Whenever you have that big of a jump in the budget, of course, it's gonna raise flags and people are gonna ask questions.
but you look at the summary on the revenue side of it, we got 872,000 more than we had last year. That's just in revenue.
Where you at? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm on the big budget sheet here. We got $872,000 more in revenue that we've increased this year.
Right.
And we knew that if we were going to equalize salaries, this was a tough year to do it. But it's the only year to do it because that's the only time you're going to have that type of savings that you have potentially, and
There's not a person up here that hasn't said that from day one, we need to pay our teachers more. And we're all great with that, I'm sure, because it was a unanimous thing.
Right.
But like I say, and I agree 100%, that's where we need to be. But I'm just trying to find the rest of the four, I'm just trying to find them.
And I understand the question, Mr. Iverson. My general response to that question, or anybody that said it would be to look around and look at our school buildings in our county and look at our salaries and ask, do you think that last year or the year before or the year before that we're adequately funding public education when we don't have a renovation fund? When we built a school for the first time in my 40 years on this earth in the last few years? That would be my general response. So my general response to that question from any budget committee would be, why do you think that something else is more important, that they're going to reap the benefit of a better economy and property tax rates than our children in Sullivan County? And if they want to rationalize that and explain it to the public or explain it to me, I'm happy to listen and have that discussion. But that's why I'm so interested to see what they plan to do with this. I mean, if you look at the history of tax raises too, I mean, it goes back to the whole point that Mr. Hughes has made so many times, as have I, that, you know, they've raised property taxes and designated pennies for renovation school funds. Then they issued bonds for the whole county, which every child benefits from. And then the next budget cycle, they take away every school system's renovation fund. Where's the logic or rationalization in that? And I think your question is a good one, Mr. I really do, because you're right. It's going to be asked, but it goes back to my main point. Does anybody think when we look at our buildings and our teacher salaries and our sports fields at all these other schools, whatever district you're in, that we're adequately funding public education? So if there is a boom in local sales tax, I think the school system should benefit. It benefits every child. It benefits our economy. It benefits families. What's one of the first things anybody looks at when they want to move somewhere? The school systems.
Mark, if you look on page 4 of the big budget, it's the schedule of appropriations.
Gotcha. Yep.
You follow me?
Yep.
Look down where it says total regular education program,
Yeah, so I'm 2.5.
2.5. That's 2.5 of the extra $4 million we're talking about.
Right.
Now, Ingrid, if I say something incorrect on that, you call my hand on it. If you go through and look at some of those totals, I think that you'll see where that $4 million is. You turn to the next page under vocational, we're almost $500,000 there, 426. And special ed is up 782, that's 0.8. So it doesn't take long to get you up to that $4 million. Now, most of that is in salaries and benefits, no question about that. But again, that was a top priority for us this year. And if you flip on over there, you'll see that we have had some reductions in the instructional program. I think you'll notice in Office of the Superintendent is down $6,000, and special ed program indirect is down 17,000, or 16.8, I guess. 26,000 under assistant principals that were down, 29,000 under fiscal services that were down. And then under operations of the plant, we're up in salaries are 272,000. And again, that's the 4% that we're paying for, maintenance. We are down 98,000 in some contracted services and other things under maintenance. So we picked up a little bit. And early childhood we're up. But that's self-funding, I think, isn't it, that early childhood? Plus insurance is going up 2.5% in January, and we have budgeted for that, I believe, increase there. Debt service, we still owe for Kettering, we still owe for the roof at East, and we still owe for the ESG grant, I think, in one of the schools.
All stayed the same.
So it doesn't take long to get up to the $4 million, and the only place that I see you can cut $2 million out is under the salary equalization plan, and I think that would be disastrous to do that. I think it would not only be disastrous, I think it's the wrong thing to do. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for our teachers to be able to be paid even close what their counterparts are paid in the cities of Kingsport and Bristol. And
Let me just, I know I'm beating a dead horse, I get it, but I'm just, again, I can't sell something if I don't understand it. I have to, that's just the way I'm wired. I have to
Oh,
believe it
right.
and buy into it and know it before I can tell someone.
I'd rather you ask them here than ask them out after we leave here.
Absolutely. So let's, back to that fourth page.
Okay?
Second line on the fourth page. It's $2.5 million. Teachers, fantastic, I get it. But where did the $3 million go if our teachers went up 2.5? I thought the grand total for all of our staff was 3.3.
No,
So,
the 3.3 that I was projecting.
no, the 3.3 million was all of the 4%, right? Wasn't that the salary equalization, was the 3.3 million?
If you look back at this presentation,
Please.
and I think this may help you a little bit, I hope
Okay.
anyways. The professional salary equity to a regional salary scale, that was
Okay.
$4.2 million. That's
That's-
what we're talking about, salary
Right.
equalization, getting us up to where we're the same as the average in the region.
Right,
And
perfect,
we're still not up to Bristol or Kingsport, but we're up to the average.
right.
A 4% raise for all of our employees, on top of the professional salary equity, was 2.3 million.
Okay,
Then we've got the 2.5% insurance increase, that's $125,000. You've got nurses who are budgeted as full-time employees, $200,000. Now, we had to spend $531,000 for the retirement incentive. If we hadn't offered the retirement incentive, this number for reduction in staff probably wouldn't be near as much as it was. That's why you do a retirement incentive.
Yeah,
to
absolutely, absolutely.
Incentivize people to retire. So
absolutely.
that's a reduction in staff, that's a reduction to our total overall budget. Now, when you look at what you can actually control in this, by losing students, how you can adjust that, insurance increase, it's gonna go up whether you've got 10,000 students or 5,000 students, insurance is going up. Nurses, we have one nurse per facility right now. To be very honest with you, we should probably have a lot more,
I agree.
because the student body is not very healthy. They're doing major procedures every single day. We just now got it to where we have one person in the building and they're there all day long. Before, they weren't even there all day long. So if something happens when they're not there, I guess your secretary's gonna cover for you. That, losing 500 in the ADA does not control anything with the nurses. We're still short.
The 2.3 million for 4% raise, that's for teachers on top of salary equalization, right?
All
For all
employees, but it
employees.
is on top of salary equalization.
Now, did we have to give a 4% pay raise? No, but,
Yeah, we did.
no, we didn't have to, but after the governor said we're giving 4%, we best give 4%, because
Absolutely.
when the word gets out that the governor has given a 4% pay raise, everybody expects it, I expect it. I mean, I think it's important that we keep that 4% in there.
Well, more than
I-
likely, the others in the region are gonna do that. So if your goal is to get that regional average and you don't give it 4%,
Right, straight back. to
you
the
just
bottom.
went backwards.
You-
Actually, to be honest with you, I mean, I'm glad I wanted to open this up, so I needed to understand it, and going back to this slide and walking through it a little bit more has gotten me there a lot quicker than me trying to work it out myself, because I was thinking the 3.3, and we were talking about different numbers, but the 4.2 and the 2.3, that's way above where we're already at. So this helped me again, thank you, because the first time I looked at it, I walked through it in my mind, but I didn't walk through it with the budget, so, okay, thank you,
Now,
I'm better.
now, when I presented the salary equalization to you, the savings,
Yeah.
maybe I should have put in the benefits part of it, but I was just
No.
I was just looking at salaries, and that's 3.3 million, and then,
Absolutely nothing wrong.
No,
It's
I'm
just,
just,
this helps me because now I see those two numbers if the 3.3 didn't get us there, cause I was like 3.3 minus 2.9, that's over 400,000. Well, that's 6.5 million.
Right.
Take the 300,000, take the 3 million away, now we're back up to a big number again, so I'm better now, I wasn't getting
And,
that.
and I've had county commissioners asking me for the salary equalization salary schedule, and I've given it out. As much as I am concerned that once you put out a salary schedule, if it's not approved, then you've got people expecting that, but when they ask for it, you have to give it. So they have the salary schedule that we have based this on, the one that Ingrid has put in the numbers, with the 4% on top of that.
Is that number, the schedule that you have, does that include the 4%?
No, no.
Okay, good, I was
And
wondering, thank you.
I've tried to make that clear to them, that
Okay.
the salary equalization plan is totally separate from the 4%.
Good.
So first thing Ingrid did was plug the numbers in with the salary equalization, and then add the 4% on top of that. Now, once we get a new salary schedule, if we approve this, then the new salary schedule would show the 4% on top of that, wouldn't it, Ingrid?
Yes.
You know,
Okay.
to start the year out.
And I will send you a copy of this presentation. It was just very last minute, so as soon as we get done, I'll share it with all of you so you can have that. Don't have to worry about seeing red.
Well, like I say, I really appreciate you taking more time, and I appreciate the discussion, because it got me where I needed to be. Because if I was asked a question an hour ago, I would hurt our cause, but now I won't hurt our cause. So I mean, it's just, I needed to be there, and thank you for that.
So I need you to do me a favor and mark draft on the top of your budgets, because this is just a draft budget. It is not a finalized budget.
Now, I think we've got to vote on the budget, but I'd like to vote on it. Then I would also like you to consider another motion, and that is to authorize the executive committee to get with Ingrid in case we find some numbers that need to be corrected, rather than call a school board meeting to come back to correct a number. I'm not saying we're gonna find anything, but there could be something that would come in from the state, or something that we would just need to have before we send to the county commission tomorrow night. Because tomorrow night, Ingrid will be there, I'll be there, David and Evelyn probably, to talk about this. So if we were to get some number in that's totally different, or a change or something, I'd like for you to authorize us to make that change, and we would send the word out to you that we've made it. If that makes any sense. I can't foresee anything happening like that, but it could.
So just a point of rule on this, if all we're sending is a draft, we don't really vote on this tonight then, right? Because we don't have to vote on a draft, we have to.
If I have read the private act correctly, it says we have to send them an approved budget, an adopted budget. And we are adopting it as a draft, and we want to make sure that they understand that. But we need to vote on it to let them know that it has been adopted. Now, there's a good chance that this will be our budget. I say it's a good chance. It may be without $2 million in it, I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping that they will come up with the $2 million to give back to us, to fund it. But if not, we'll have to come back and talk about where we get that $2 million. But I guess I'm asking you tonight to approve it as a draft, as a preliminary budget, that we send to the budget committee for their consideration tomorrow night, and that we approve it as presented, with the stipulation that the executive committee be allowed to make a change in numbers should that come in from the state, that we had to make a change, or if we find something that we have in that's incorrect. And I don't see anything, but if we did that change, we'd get the word out to you that we'd put something down incorrectly. And most of this I have not seen, but I have been involved in the conversations, as I'm supposed to be, with the major categories, and especially as it deals with the expenditure side of it. Any further discussion before we go to Dr. Koch has to leave at 5:30. He has a commitment at South tonight at 6. So.
I just had one quick question. I think Ingrid touched on this. I just want to make sure. So we are trying to, in this budget, we're asking for at least some money to be able to have in a renovation fund, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then,
It's
What-
not,
That
it's
probably needs
not
to be
in
part
that
of the
budget.
motion.
We're gonna have a separate renovation fund budget.
been really different with COVID and what we can do in our school buildings and how our communities use them, but I noticed, cause I recall when they took away our renovation funds, they actually had to go back and add money in the budget to meet state law maintenance of effort, and they put that, if I remember right, a few years ago, under the leases or like a community use fund. But the last 2 years, the county benefits, they use our buildings, that's great. I mean, we're all citizens. But the school system in last budget cycle received a big zero for that, right?
We received $300,000, which
Okay.
was the original part that we got
300.
before all the messing with the budget. So we get $300,000, and the bill is usually about 1.2 million.
So in other words, like $900,000 shortfall? Okay.
How close is this budget to, maintenance of effort?
It means maintenance.
Okay, I mean, is it significantly above, or is it close, or
The
don't know?
revenues are
Kinda hard to
exactly
know.
the same as they were last year, bottom
Okay.
line, so, it means it just.
Okay, gotcha.
Just like it did last year.
Yep.
Okay.
And be prepared for a call meeting. First step, it has to get out of the budget committee tomorrow night. Now, they may have the rule of where they can defer it to another meeting next week, because they have to meet until they actually approve whatever we send over. And they may send it back to us. They can reject it. If they reject it, it comes back to the board. So we need to be prepared with just a couple of days' notice to meet and talk again about. And they cannot do line item. Now, I'm sure that they will tell us, individually what they would like to see, but they cannot do line item. It has to be the total budget. But when they look at the categories, they have asked me for some things about how we plan to spend the fund balance, and I don't think that there's any real need to give them a plan on the fund balance, because as you can see, this kind of eliminates it. It takes it out of what we have. And now, ESSER money, federal money, that's a whole different conversation that we will have to have and put together the budget for that. And you will hear me say some things tomorrow night to them, if you talk to any of them, when they start talking about what are the plans for some of the ESSER money. We're talking about HVAC at Central, we're talking about HVAC at South, we're talking about HVAC in the vocational wing at East High School, and additional ESSER money that may be coming in. We're talking about the three oldest schools in the building, East High School, Mary Hughes, and Indian Springs. Those are the three oldest buildings that's left. And step one in that process is to get a concept design of what changes you could make and what you can use the money for. So if you hear that discussion, that's why. There's nothing that we can do at this point other than try to put together the thought process. And I think there's an extension on ESSER 3.0 up till July the 15th, is that right? Or did it move
Well,
up?
August 1st is the new deadline
August.
for the application.
Okay.
We have a webinar tomorrow at 2 on ESSER 3.0.
So we won't know much on that, but behind the scenes, we've got to be working to get the plans together so Dr. Cox and Evelyn can get all those things submitted in a timely fashion. And I'll entertain a motion at this time concerning the budget.
I make a motion that we accept the draft budget for the 2021-22 school year,
Okay, you've
and
heard.
giving the executive committee permission to do as need be, and then informing us what they've done.
Can I ask a question prior, point of information prior to
Okay.
get a second? I know we have to get a second to actually go forward, but earlier the discussion was that we were gonna ask for the extra money. So is that gonna be is that
Yeah.
part of the motion? We wanna ask for that
But-
extra money?
Because that's part of the budget. I mean,
That's what I'm saying. I just
yeah,
wanna make
yeah.
sure that we're clear on
Do I
that.
need to work to say that as well?
Because if we're not asking for extra
We
money,
are
then we're
asking.
saying that we're gonna fund it some other way, so I think we need to be clear in our motion what we're doing.
Go ahead and reword your motion, Dr. Rouse.
I will add, to clarify, that we are asking, that the county commission give us the money that we need to balance our budget.
You've heard the motion to accept the budget as presented with the clarification that the county commission be requested to give us the additional money needed to balance the budget, and also to authorize the executive committee to make any changes that might be mandated by any new numbers that might come in the next couple days. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
Mr. Gilmore seconds. Any discussion? Roll call, Ms. King.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Iverson,
Yes.
Mr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Dr. Rouse,
Yes.
Mr. Spivey,
Yes.
Mr. Gilmore.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0 to present this budget to the Budget Committee as presented to us, which with clarification that it would require additional funding from the County Commission. And if we need to send something out, if numbers come in, it will come from the superintendent to avoid the sunshine thing of me having to send something to you and my getting in trouble. So we'll make sure that we send it out in the correct way. I have one more item to give you, which is a plat of the Bishop property, the 8.2 acres that you might want to take a copy of. Not here for discussion on it, but that will probably be discussed in the next day or two also with County Commission. So, and I drew one line on there. That line's kind of not a surveyor's line, but I drew a line to show you where the 8.2 is, a dark line. And so with that said, I'll,
Make
okay,
sure- And we
Mr.
are gonna send over the renovation, right? That's part of what we're gonna send.
You got that one ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want me to go run through, nutrition and renovation if you want to pick up.
Okay, let's do that. Dr. Cox has to leave, but we will,
Okay, I've got Mike, so,
oh.
I got 5 minutes, can you do
Okay.
it?
We can do it 5 minutes. I'll talk
Okay.
fast if you listen fast. School nutrition fund budget, you have that as a printout right there. That's a self-supporting budget. We don't contribute anything, the county doesn't contribute anything, they all take care of themselves. School nutrition has come a long ways in the past 5 years. She has included 4% for all of her employees in that as well, because if we give the general purpose employees, you gotta give them that too. So that's a self-supporting budget, doesn't require anything, the county commission does have to approve it, so that's why I'm presenting it here for you. Renovation fund budget, I do not have the printout, but I'll send you a printout of the renovation fund budget. I can tell you that the 5-year capital improvement plan, there'll be a year's worth of expenses in that. We'll present them the 4 years of the remaining 5 plan. There's also normal renovation fund expenses in there. So 1.9 for the 5-year capital improvement plan and 1.5 for the normal renovation expenses. We're gonna request that be funded by the county because we no longer have reserves to cover.
And this is the same plan we sent last year, with just being updated.
Correct,
with
we're just
the-
updating it to be 21-22.
Just
That's
wanna-
my quick.
As long as it's all out there, everybody's
Yep.
good. All right.
I'm done.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. I guess we are adjourned.